What if I told you that one of the earliest cyborgs didn't come from a video game, or even the future, but from a mass grave over 1,500 years old? From cannibalism to ancient surgeries, our ancestors were far more brutal and bizarre than we ever imagined. Humanity is a strange species, not just mildly unusual, but arguably the most eccentric and unpredictable life form to ever roam Earth. All across the globe, archaeological digs and paleontological expeditions have unearthed discoveries that defy comprehension, relics that disturb, confuse, and even frighten the scientists who find them. Among the most unsettling is a site in Italy, at Acropolis, where over 200 bodies dating back more than a millennium and a half were discovered. But it wasn't the number that stunned researchers. It was one man, catalogued as TUS 380, who redefined the limits of ancient endurance and ingenuity. Estimated to have died between 40 and 50 years old, this middle-aged male had undergone an amputation at the mid-forearm, an excruciating procedure performed without anesthesia, antibiotics, or post-op care. Yet that wasn't the most shocking detail. At the end of his severed arm, archaeologists found not scar tissue or decay, but a weapon, an iron blade embedded into the stump, fashioned and fastened in a way that turned this man into a prehistoric fusion of flesh and metal. And this was no ceremonial prop. Wear patterns and skeletal adaptations made one thing clear. He used this arm a lot. His teeth, for example, had been ground down to their very cores, likely from habitually tightening leather straps that secured his metal appendage. Chronic dental infections and abscesses confirmed the damage was more than cosmetic. It was brutal, constant, and painful. His shoulder joint had physically shifted over time, reshaping under the strain of repetitive, unnatural movement. The amputation site itself bore the marks of friction and pressure consistent with wielding a blade as a limb. This wasn't a man healing from trauma. He was evolving through it. His culture might explain the transformation. TUS 380 was a Lombard, part of a Germanic group famed for their warlike traditions. The theory: he lost his arm in battle, then replaced it with a killing tool, living out his days as a human weapon. He didn't just survive. He adapted, endured, and ultimately thrived, dying of natural causes in a time when few made it past their 40s. Not every ancient tale ends with a quiet death. Take, for instance, a leg bone unearthed in Kenya's Turkana Basin, dating back 1.45 million years. The individual wasn't Homo sapiens, but an early human relative. The bone was scarred, etched with 9 incisions placed deliberately where muscle and flesh would have once attached. This wasn't a predator's doing. It was methodical, surgical. The implication: the oldest known case of butchery inflicted by one hominin upon another. In short, cannibalism. What's more disturbing is that we have no idea who did it or why. Multiple species lived in the region during that era, and this grisly evidence hints at competition, hunger, or violence between early human cousins. The region's fluctuating water sources and food scarcities only deepen the mystery. Could famine have driven our ancestors to consume their own? It's grim, but plausible. And while several sites have vied for the title of oldest evidence of cannibalism, this shin bone remains the most direct, unambiguous piece of proof. But for sheer confusion, no site rivals the Rising Star Cave in South Africa's Malmani Dolomites. First explored in the 1980s, the cave's winding, perilous tunnels concealed a hidden chamber named the naledi chamber, where anthropologists made an astonishing discovery. over 1,500 bones representing at least 15 individuals. The range of ages, from infants to the elderly, was startling. But the real mystery? How the bodies got there. The path to the chamber required crawling through narrow crevices, scaling jagged walls, and descending a nearly 50-foot vertical chute, all in complete darkness. Originally, researchers assumed flooding had swept the remains into the chamber. But sediment analysis disproved this. The bodies had been deposited intentionally over time. No evidence of animal attacks. No signs of water transport. Just neatly arranged bones, placed gently in one of the least accessible places imaginable. That left one conclusion. The bodies were placed there by other humans, or at least human relatives. Enter Homo naledi, an extinct hominin species with small brains, lightweight builds, and tree-climbing physiques. These beings lived between 335,000 and 236,000 years ago, making them shockingly recent on the evolutionary timeline. Here's the kicker. If Homo naledi was responsible for transporting bodies into the chamber, it suggests ritual behavior, possibly even funeral practices. But how did they navigate the labyrinth? Some speculate they used fire or left visual markers. Others doubt they did it at all, proposing that other Homo species, possibly even Homo sapiens, relocated the bodies centuries later. Either explanation is astounding. One hints at advanced cultural practices in a species with a chimp-sized brain. The other implies that modern humans once carried ancient remains deep into a cave they didn't fully understand. Both leave more questions than answers. Now, if the rising star mystery left you reeling, just wait until you hear about Rupkund, better known by its chilling nickname, Skeleton Lake. Tucked away in India's Trishul Massif, this glacial pool has earned an eerie reputation for good reason. Encircling its shallow, icy waters are the scattered remains of hundreds of individuals, possibly over 800. Discovered in the 1940s, the initial reaction was panic. British officials feared these were casualties of a Japanese invasion during World War II. But closer examination revealed that the bones were far older, and that many of the skeletons still bore belongings from centuries past. Wooden tools, iron-tipped weapons, leather sandals, and decorative rings. Even more unsettling. The victims appeared to have died in a specific and horrifying manner. Many skulls and upper bodies displayed round, concussive trauma, precisely the kind you'd expect from something falling with speed and force. Like hail. Local legends from nearby villages whispered of an ancient royal caravan caught in a deadly mountain storm. According to the tale, an entire entourage, including a king, was obliterated by massive hailstones during a high-altitude crossing. The remains matched the story. Scientists concluded that Rupkund's dead had fallen victim to one such lethal ice storm. Case closed? Not quite. Subsequent studies unearthed complications. Not all the skeletons had suffered hail-related injuries. Worse, DNA analysis on 38 individuals revealed something staggering. They didn't all die at the same time, or even come from the same place. Instead, at least 3 distinct groups were identified. 2 had South and Southeast Asian ancestry, perishing around 1,000 years ago. But the third group hailed from the Mediterranean, specifically Greece and Crete, and their deaths were much more recent, roughly 200 years ago. 3 ethnic populations, multiple time periods, a single secluded glacial lake filled with death. How these diverse groups met the same fate in the same place, centuries apart, remains unsolved. The hailstorm theory may explain some casualties, but 3 separate deadly hail events in one location? That stretches credulity. And the analysis was limited to just 38 individuals. Who knows how many unique populations might be represented among the rest? For now, the lake keeps its secrets. But if Rupkund embodies the chaotic, random cruelty of nature, the plastered skulls of Jericho show the deliberate, ritualistic side of ancient morbidity. In the 1930s, excavations around the Levant, particularly near Jericho, uncovered haunting artifacts. Dozens of heads, encased in layers of molded plaster, carefully painted and inlaid with seashells to simulate lifelike features: eyes, hairlines, skin textures. The resemblance to human faces was eerie enough, but things turned truly macabre once the plaster was removed. Inside were actual skulls. The jawbones had been removed, and the craniums buried beneath the floors of homes, quite literally underfoot. Most belonged to adult males, though women and children were among them. Initial interpretations suggested gruesome trophy-taking, possibly the heads of vanquished enemies, transformed into totems. But newer theories offer a different, though no less eerie, perspective. These may have been ancestral relics, early burial practices that honored the dead by preserving their likeness and keeping them close. Over time, the identities of these skulls may have faded, leaving behind only a general reverence for the ancestors. What's more, these plaster heads weren't buried and forgotten. They were handled, passed around, displayed and venerated for generations, until the practice mysteriously vanished around 8,000 years ago. All that remains is an enigmatic myth, found etched into the region's cultural memory. A mortal? What does he get in the end? Glaze poured on his head, lime on the top of his skull. Chilling stuff, but even that doesn't quite match the horror found in Scotland's Outer Hebrides, where archaeologists discovered Bronze Age skeletons with a shocking twist. Literally, beneath the floorboards of ancient dwellings lay 4 seemingly normal skeletons. They appeared intact, and no signs of trauma, no irregular burial positions. But closer inspection revealed a grotesque truth. The bodies were composites. One presumed female skeleton included a male skull and bones from 2 additional males. The other 3 remains also turned out to be chimeric mashups, jigsaw humans. But it didn't stop there. Chemical analysis revealed that these mixed remains had been exposed to high acidity, suggesting they had been submerged in a peat bog, a natural preservation chamber with remarkable demineralizing properties. The implication? These corpses had been pickled. Someone, or some community, stitched together bodies from multiple individuals, submerged them in bogs for preservation, then later retrieved and interred them inside their homes. As if that weren't bizarre enough, radiocarbon dating revealed another twist. The remains predated the structures in which they were found by centuries, meaning the skeletons had been curated, preserved, and passed down across generations before finally being laid to rest. Most scholars interpret this as an extreme form of ancestral worship. These communities may have revered their forebears to such a degree that they literally constructed and preserved hybrid family relics. Others suggest a darker motive, perhaps trophies of conquest. But given the meticulous preparation, reverence seems the likelier explanation. Let's head west now, across the Atlantic, to one of the most gruesome archaeological finds ever made on American soil. Evidence not just of violence, but of utter societal collapse. In the arid plateaus of southwestern Colorado, remnants of the ancient Basketmaker Pueblo culture lie buried. For thousands of years, this group thrived in pit houses, semi-subterranean dwellings dug into the earth for insulation and protection. But in several of these homes, archaeologists stumbled upon the remnants of a tragedy far beyond normal death. At one site, at least 24 individuals were uncovered. But 7 of those bodies drew particular attention. They had been dismembered, defleshed, and cooked. Bones were charred and fractured to extract marrow. Skulls showed signs of burning and trauma. Some had been cracked open, with scoop marks indicating that brains were deliberately removed and consumed. This wasn't a hasty raid. It was methodical, deliberate, complete. Evidence around the site confirmed the horror. Tools and cooking pots were stained with human blood, indicating that victims were cooked in the very utensils they once used to prepare meals. But perhaps the most revolting clue came from the hearth, the spiritual center of any basketmaker home. Inside the hearth's ashes, researchers found human feces, not just disgusting, but deeply symbolic, an act of defilement against a once sacred space. And this wasn't just any stool. It tested positive for myoglobin, muscle protein found only in meat. More specifically, human meat. Whoever left that coprolite had eaten nothing but flesh for at least 12 hours. Initially, scholars resisted the conclusion. Some hoped that the carnage could be blamed on an invading force or dismissed as misinterpreted signs of ritual dismemberment. But the biochemical evidence was irrefutable. Cannibalism had happened. Not once, but perhaps repeatedly. What's even more disturbing is that this event wasn't isolated. Further investigations revealed a broader pattern. The Basketmaker Pueblo culture, once peaceful, had undergone a terrifying transformation. Archaeologists found 72 sites across the region with signs of cannibalistic activity, 38 of which were confirmed beyond doubt. One study of 870 skeletons discovered that more than 8% bore trauma consistent with human consumption. Even higher numbers showed signs of interpersonal violence. What could push a society to such extremes? 2 key events may offer an answer. Roughly 850 years ago, the Chaco system, the cultural and spiritual heart of the Pueblo people, collapsed. Around the same time, the climate shifted dramatically. After years of stable rain and prosperity, crushing droughts devastated the land. Crops failed. Famine spread. Social order unraveled. In this bleak new reality, neighbors may have turned on one another, not out of cruelty, but desperation. Cannibalism wasn't ritual. It was survival. And the evidence suggests that it wasn't a choice taken lightly, but a descent into horror when every other option had vanished. It's a sobering reminder that civilization is fragile. Scratch the surface, and beneath lies a history soaked in violence, ingenuity, desperation, and ritual. And what's most terrifying of all, this is just what we've found. Countless other mysteries remain buried beneath rock, ash, and sediment, waiting to rewrite everything we think we know about the human story. So if you made it this far without flinching, you've got a stronger stomach than most. And if this dive into humanity's darkest chapters has you craving more, there's plenty left to uncover. Subscribe to Violent Origins for more.